I remember the first time I set foot on Velmora, that brutal, windswept planet at the edge of the galaxy, with a sky tinted by turquoise clouds and twin moons glaring down from on high. My name is Dax Carver, an ex-mercenary turned freelance troubleshooter, and I was there because rumor said something was stirring in the dense swamplands, something that demanded the attention of corporate fixers, bounty hunters, and lonely souls like myself. No one had told me precisely what I might find, but I suspected it was trouble, real trouble. Velmora was a place of primal energies, savage storms, and labyrinthine terrain, complete with moss-covered canyons, muddy lakes, and crater-pitted steppes. The planet was half swamp, half barren desert, with the extremes colliding in ways that tormented even the sturdiest expedition teams. But I came alone, trusting neither companions nor corporate sponsors, because I believed in my own instincts. The outpost that served as Velmora's only major population center lay near a stony plateau, battered by daily gusts that rattled the prefabricated huts. My goal was to find the rumored test subject, something the Tarvik Corporation wanted badly, or so the chatter suggested. Whether it was an advanced clone, a cybernetic anomaly, or a genetically tweaked alien, I did not know. All I had was a data snippet extracted from a half-burnt console, Wolfen trial. Next stage, Phase 7. Out among the battered huts, the last place one might get a decent meal was a cramped canteen hammered together from starship scrap. Through the rickety door, I stepped into the stench of stale ale and perspiration, scanning for any local fixers. I found a man who had the look of one who knew more about Velmora's hidden corners than he let on. Short, wide shoulders, eyes that shifted nervously. His name, I learned, was Max Sivrin. Mac told me about the howls that sometimes echoed across the ridges at night. He said the storms carried those eerie voices of an unknown species, some apex predator rumored to have been uplifted by unscrupulous biotech labs. Some said the creatures were half-sentient, melding cunning intelligence with bestial instincts. Others swore they were simply monstrous animals, nothing more. But Mac mentioned something else. An off-world merc had been found shredded to ribbons in the canyons, and the footprints around his remains were undeniably wolf-like. That was all I had, mere legends and the chill sense of dread that sank in whenever I glanced toward the horizon. I was no stranger to fear or the unknown. During my prior career, I had brushed against all manner of horrors, rogue mechs, savage xenos, but something about Velmora felt different. The entire planet felt primed, as if at any moment it might bare its teeth. I set out early the next morning, the sun cracking the horizon, its pale rays shining upon fanged rock formations. An electric wind hissed in the hollows. My gear was minimal, a battered pulse rifle, a sidearm with only a few power cells, a canteen, and a trove of advanced scanning tools. I had a rebreather, but rarely used it, since the atmosphere, though pungent, was breathable enough. In my belt pouch, a small medkit rattled. I considered myself prepared for anything, but I had no idea what truly awaited me in those swamps. My first days in the wilderness were an exercise in futility. I found nothing but random footprints from Velmora's standard fauna, reptilian grazers, small scavenger rodents, the occasional avian that soared overhead. I pitched a tent in the crook of a towering ridge on my second night, lulled by the planet's whistling wind. That night, I heard something that set my hair on end, a low, sonorous howl, reverberating in the canyons. It sounded close, then far. It resonated with such fierce intelligence that I found myself clutching my rifle, waiting, uncertain if I should move or stay. Eventually, the sound subsided. I forced myself to lie down, feigning calm, until restless sleep claimed me. By the time I awoke, the sun had climbed high, and I saw footprints in the mud near my tent. Wolf, like footprints, too large for a normal canid. My pulse quickened. The prints suggested something bipedal, not purely animal, something that walked upright yet retained the shape and motion of a massive wolf. A few days into my expedition, I spotted movement along a distant ridge. Through my scope, I made out a tall figure, backlit by the midday sun, hair or fur rippling in the wind. It looked like a living silver statue, broad-shouldered, a tail flicking behind it. Even from far away, the figure's height dwarfed that of a normal human, probably more than 7 feet. For a moment, it stood still, as if surveying me from the same vantage. The muzzle, elongated and predatory, might have been a trick of the light, but I knew in my gut it was no illusion. This, I realized, was my target, the rumored wolfen entity. My breath caught, a chill rushing through my veins. Then the figure vanished, leaping back from the ridgeline with startling agility, leaving me uncertain whether to chase or lay low. At dusk, I pressed on. My footprints left sloshing impressions in the swampy soil, and each splash reminded me of how visible I must be to any watchful eyes. Overgrowth brushed against my legs, tangling in my gear. With each hour, I felt an increasing sense of being hunted, the hairs on my arms prickling in primal alert. Velmora's nights were frigid, and soon a storm gathered. Distant lightning flickered along the horizon, and thunder rolled. I found shelter beneath a massive root system of a gnarled tree, anchoring my tent in the mud. The stench was overwhelming, but it was the only place that provided coverage from the cutting wind. Midway through the night, just as the storm peaked, I heard footsteps outside, padded, deliberate steps. They circled my tent, sometimes halting, sometimes resuming. My heart pounded, and I slowly unzipped the entrance to peer through the gloom. Lightning revealed glimpses of a silhouette, tall, brawny, half wolf, half woman, with piercing eyes that flashed at me between the slants of rain. Her muzzle was indeed elongated, and her limbs were corded with muscle. She wore something akin to a minimal harness or tattered garb that offered no real modesty. I did not dare move. In one single bound, she lunged closer. I dropped my rifle in fright, scrabbling in the mud. My pulse hammered so loudly that I could barely hear anything else. She sniffed the air around me, her gaze intense, those eyes of predatory gold color. Yet, she did not strike. Instead, she merely observed, as if weighing me in some incomprehensible measure. Before I could find my voice or even breathe properly, she jumped back, letting out a low, reverberating growl that echoed across the soaked earth. I froze, half expecting her to tear into me. Instead, she moved swiftly, her powerful legs carrying her away until she melded with the shadows. Seconds later, a flash of lightning revealed her perched on a rocky outcropping, peering at me from a distance. Then, with a final flick of her silver tail, she vanished once more. The next morning, though the storm had subsided, I was anything but calm. The enormous wolfen female, powerful, swift, and disconcertingly sentient, had decided not to kill me. Why? Was there a flicker of recognition in her eyes? She didn't speak. Yet the intelligence behind those golden irises seemed undeniable. Packing my things, I resolved to learn more. My mission had been to locate the subject that Tarvik Corporation had rumored to have tested here. Now that I'd found her, or at least glimpsed her, the question remained, do I capture her? Do I make contact? Or do I run for my life? Stalking her seemed insane, but I needed answers. I followed footprints where the mud allowed, weaving through thick vegetation. The deeper I ventured, the more I felt her presence, as if she hovered just outside my field of vision. Sometimes, I caught glimpses of her silver fur through the undergrowth. Occasionally, I found half-eaten kills, local reptilian creatures, torn open by formidable claws. The days blurred together, each one an exercise in caution, fear, and strange fascination. I discovered signs that Tarvik Corporation had once deployed a research station in the swamps. Rusted scaffolds jutted from the ground, and a half-collapsed dome of reinforced glass lay half buried in weeds. Inside, I found shattered stasis pods, slime-coated computers, and records too corrupted to read. The only clue left was a battered log from a scientist named Dr. Anvar Troy. He documented the Wolfen project, describing how they spliced human and lupine DNA with an undisclosed alien genome, shaping an apex predator that retained cunning, empathy, and heightened senses. Their project hoped to create a perfect soldier. But apparently, something went wrong. The notes trailed off in abrupt confusion, ending with phrases like Subject E1 and rapid growth, unstoppable potential, followed by cryptic references to a meltdown or sabotage. This silver-furred female must be that apex creation Subject E1, presumably. Reading further, I learned of Tarvik's fear that these Wolfen could breed or adapt beyond control. The logs indicated that, if not contained, the Wolfen might outcompete humanity on the planet entirely. Some lines described her as dangerously independent, resistant to mind control or sedation. That was why they left her behind, or so it seemed. Days later, as I trekked through yet another bog, I almost stumbled into a trap. A hidden sensor beeped from the mud, blinking with a corporate insignia. Someone else had placed it there, presumably to detect Wolfen movement. Furious curses escaped me. I realized I wasn't the only hunter in these swamps. Tarvik must have sent a kill team or retrieval unit. I needed to be extra careful. Not only was the Wolfen potentially dangerous, but corporate agents with advanced gear could be a bigger threat. They wouldn't look kindly upon a scruffy ex-merc like me sniffing around their top-secret experiment. So I continued forward, forging alliances with no one, trusting only my instincts and the battered data. As the days passed, I found fresh footprints that suggested multiple Wolfen. However, each time I tried to follow, the prints disappeared in the labyrinth of thick brush and watery gullies. The only consistent presence was her, the tall silver Wolfen female lingering at the edge of my vision, ensuring I never forgot she was near. One evening, I ventured too far. My night vision was decent, but the swirling mists made a mockery of distance. Beneath the ghostly glow of Velmora's twin moons, I stumbled across a slope slick with algae, and I tumbled down into a shallow ravine, scraping my arms. The stench of decaying vegetation filled my nostrils. That's when I heard a low growl behind me. I spun around, rifle at the ready, only to see her looming tall above me on the slope. Her eyes glinted with cold fire, but she did not leap to attack. Instead, she growled again, a sound that seemed to reverberate through my skull. I tried to stand, but my ankle twisted painfully, and I let out a hiss. She made a slow, deliberate approach, muzzle wrinkled into a half-snarl. I raised my weapon, but a single swipe of her clawed hand knocked it away. Her strength was immense. Then she pinned me against the muddy ground, her hot breath against my face. I could see the thick cords of muscle beneath her fur. Her jaws parted slightly, revealing fangs that could have torn my throat out in an instant. All the world blurred. My only coherent thought was that I was about to die, but she only pressed her weight upon me, holding me as if testing my resistance. I thrashed once, but she let out a warning snarl that froze me in place. She lowered her head, sniffing my neck and chest. Her ears twitched, and her tail swished behind her. Time seemed to stretch. The only sounds were my ragged breathing and the slow drip of water from the twisted roots overhead. A moment later, she gripped the collar of my jacket, tugging me up. I fought to keep my feet, but my ankle flared with pain. She half-dragged me, occasionally emitting that low, rumbling vocalization, as if urging me onward, deeper into the swamp. We eventually reached a small clearing, shielded by towering reeds. There, she laid me down near a cluster of flattened grass, all but ignoring my trembling attempts to resist. I expected a swift end, but her behavior was wholly different. She sniffed my wounds, licked away some of the blood on my scraped forearm. Then, in a curiously gentle motion, she brushed her muzzle against my cheek. I had heard that some wolven species had complex rituals for establishing trust, but this was no ordinary beast. She possessed an alien intelligence. My heart hammered so fiercely that I felt ready to pass out. Her golden eyes flicked over me, thoughtful, measuring. Then she lifted her muzzle to the sky and let out a howl that reverberated through the swamp. The sound sent a chill down my spine, a chord that seemed to declare, "This one is mine." Over the next few days, my situation was surreal. My ankle needed rest. So, to my astonishment, the wolfen female, who I soon mentally named Silver, for her luminous fur allowed me to stay in a makeshift den she apparently used. It was a hollow of woven reeds and shredded tarps, likely stolen from the old research station. She hunted local creatures and dropped fresh kills near me. It was not appealing cuisine, but I had little choice. She did not speak, not in any language I recognized, but she made a variety of growls, whines, and soft huffs. Over time, I began to glean something like meaning behind them, calls to follow, warnings of danger, mild expressions of disapproval. She was unbelievably fast, adept at disappearing and reappearing. Her sense of smell must have been incredible. She seemed fascinated by me, my weapons, my clothing, my hair. Often, she would sniff at my scalp or trace her claws over the fabric of my jacket. Once, when I attempted to leave and gather some gear I left behind, she blocked my way with a sharp bark, as though insisting I remain. Soon, I recognized that, in her mind, I was not her enemy. Instead, I was her quarry, claimed in some primal sense, a curious new presence that she refused to relinquish. Perhaps it was that she had never encountered a human who did not immediately attempt to kill or capture her. Or maybe there was a deeper wolfen instinct at play, a notion of mates or territory. At times, she would press her muzzle to my shoulder or breathe in my ear, an oddly intimate gesture that both frightened and intrigued me. I was too aware of how easily she could shred me if I angered her. In the evenings, I found her watchful presence comforting, though I never dropped my guard entirely. When my ankle began to heal, I decided to attempt communication. I pointed at myself and said, "Dax." Then I pointed at her, tilting my head inquisitively. She gazed at me, tilting her ears, before making a guttural sound that might have been an attempt at a word. It didn't sound like Silver, but it had a short, clipped form. I repeated the sound, half choking on it, and she bared her teeth in what might have been a grin, or perhaps a sign of amusement. Over time, we pieced together a crude vocabulary. She wasn't a mindless beast, but her throat and muzzle were shaped differently from a human's, making many words difficult. She grasped certain words if I spoke slowly, and I did my best to interpret her panting and growling. Our interactions became more collaborative, more affectionate, in a primal sense. I realized with uneasy clarity that she considered me hers. Something like a bond had formed, one I never planned, yet one that took root in the feral heart of Velmora. Each morning, she led me deeper into the swamp, moving in graceful leaps. Sometimes, I lost sight of her, only to have her circle back, guiding me around sinkholes or warning me of hidden predators. I noticed that she frequently paused to smell the wind, her ears flicking alertly. One day, her hackles rose in a silent alarm. She signaled for me to crouch behind some boulders. Moments later, I heard the whine of an antigrav engine overhead. A sleek gunship soared across the canopy, scanning the ground with bright spotlights. I hid, heart pounding. Tarvik's kill team, no doubt. As I crouched there, pressed close to Silver's side, I realized that the corporation had grown impatient. They intended to flush the Wolfen out, either to recapture or to kill. We had to move carefully. If they cornered us, they would not distinguish friend from foe. Twice that week, we encountered squads of heavily armed mercenaries, sweeping the swamps in tight formations. They had motion trackers and high-powered rifles, even exosuits designed for heavy terrain. They left behind the corpses of local fauna and any smaller wolfen they encountered. I found the remains of a wolfen pup, likely shot in the back. Rage curled inside me as I realized just how ruthless Tarvik was. Silver's reaction was even more visceral. She let out a heart-wrenching whimper, then howled to the skies. Her eyes blazed with furious sorrow. I suspected it might have been her kin. After that, she became more protective of me, rarely letting me out of her sight. A part of me questioned my own sanity. Here I was, forging a strange bond with an engineered being, a Wolfwoman. Yet, the moment I saw that dead pup, I knew that Tarvik had crossed a line. Whatever illusions I harbored about retrieving a bounty or turning her in dissolved, my only mission now became survival and, if possible, stopping Tarvik's cruelty. Eventually, the confrontation I dreaded came to pass. While trailing along a narrow embankment, we ran headlong into a group of 4 Tarvik mercs. They wore angular body armor with the corporate logo, sporting advanced rifles. "Contact!" one shouted, leveling his weapon. Instinct took over. I dove behind a rock, pulling out my sidearm, returning fire with sizzling plasma bolts. Silver snarled and vanished into the brush, moving with silent ferocity. The mercs spread out, trying to flank us. One lobbed a stun grenade. I ducked, but the concussive wave rattled my teeth. As I gathered my wits, I heard a dreadful shriek. Silver had ambushed one of the mercs from behind, her claws rending his armor. He went down with a gurgling cry. The others opened fire in a hail of scorching beams, but she darted away, bounding across the bog like a living ghost. I took advantage of their distraction, popping up to shoot one merc square in the visor. He collapsed, dropping his rifle. The remaining 2 cursed and retreated behind thick tree roots. One shouted into his comm, "We need backup. Wolfen's subject is engaged, and it has a human accomplice." Time slowed. I saw the muzzle flash as they fired, scorching the air near me. My pulse hammered. My sidearm was running low on power. Then Silver reappeared in a burst of speed, launching herself upon the nearest merc, knocking him flat. She clamped her jaws onto his shoulder. The final merc pivoted, trying to aim, but I squeezed off a plasma bolt that caught him in the chest. When the violence ended, the mercs lay motionless. My lungs burned with adrenaline. Silver stood panting, fur matted with blood, though not all of it was hers. She locked eyes with me, and I approached cautiously, heart in my throat. She gave a short huff, and I realized she was checking to see if I was injured. We should go, I managed, voice tight. That was enough to convey the urgency. Silver seemed to grasp it. She took one last glance at the bodies, then sprinted off, beckoning me to follow. We fled deeper into Velmora's wilderness, not knowing how many mercs would soon swarm the area. The encounter had reminded me of the precariousness of our alliance. If Silver had not been there, I might have died. Equally, if I had not been there, she might have faced stiffer odds. In some unspoken way, we had become partners in survival. Despite the new normal of constant danger, a curious closeness developed between us. The lines between species, between hunter and hunted, blurred day by day. I often woke in the mornings to find Silver pressed against me, her muzzle resting near my neck, providing surprising warmth in the chill air. Once, she guided me to a hidden glade, ringed by ancient stones etched with cryptic symbols. There, a small pack of wolfen lingered 3 or 4, each with distinct pelts. Though none as large or as imposing as she was, they eyed me warily, ears flattened. Silver rumbled something, stepping close to me, almost protectively. Then they relaxed, albeit only slightly. One of them sniffed my clothes, teeth bared in uncertain tension. Another circled, leaning in to get a better sense of me. I remained absolutely still, aware that these wolfen might be even less tolerant of my presence. But they did not attack. They merely studied me. That day, we shared a communal kill some large lizard-like beast. Silver tore off a chunk of meat and dropped it by my side. It was raw, of course, and I could barely stomach more than a few bites after cooking it with my portable stove. The wolfen didn't mind. They devoured it in primal fashion. As night fell, the pack parted ways, each heading off into different areas. A quiet ritual of howls and yips seemed to pass between them, with Silver repeating short growls as though conferring a plan. I caught only glimpses of their meaning, territory boundaries, hunting schedules, silent alarms about the human squads. Then, we were alone again, Silver and I. She pressed her muzzle to my chest, letting out a soft, breathy sound that might have been relief or contentment. In that moment, I wondered if she was lonely, the apex of her kind, carrying the burdens of a half-humanoid, half-lupine existence. The others seemed to accept her leadership, but she was different enough that perhaps she did not truly belong. And here I was, equally out of place, my own species arrayed against me. In that quiet, shared solitude, I realized how tenuous our alliance was, yet how fiercely I was beginning to value it. Word traveled fast among the outlaws and survivalists that Tarvik had escalated operations. While scrounging for supplies near an abandoned forward camp, I overheard a pair of off-world scavengers gossiping about Tarvik's containment measure, something big, rumored to be a weapon that could decimate the wolfen on the planet in one fell swoop, had arrived in orbit. They called it the Thunder Spear, a code name for an orbital cannon or mass driver. My stomach clenched. If Tarvik was prepared to glass entire regions of Velmora, they wouldn't hesitate. Their only concern was to bury the project's secrets. The wolfen were living proof of their illegal experiments. They would rather commit genocide than admit wrongdoing. I also heard that Tarvik had pinned a price on my head, labeling me a traitorous operative. That was enough reason for local bounty hunters to keep an eye out for me. My face was posted on wanted bulletins, Dax Carver capture or kill, returning to Silver. I tried to communicate the danger. My attempts were half in gestures, half in stunted words. Big weapon, I said, pointing toward the sky. Tarvik, I continued, making a slicing motion with my hand. Will. Kill. Wolfen, she bristled, letting out a sharp bark. Her ears flattened. She understood enough to sense the threat. though the concept of an orbital strike might have been beyond her. Nonetheless, her immediate posture was readiness. She recognized that Tarvik was the enemy. We had to warn the rest of her pack. We had to find a way off Velmora, or at least to shut down Tarvik's weapon. But time was short, and our resources limited. Desperate for answers, we trekked toward the remains of the largest Tarvik installation, rumored to be hidden in the canyon of the old machines. This was where the corporation had tested advanced prototypes and stored heavy equipment. If there was a control relay or a data center to sabotage the orbital weapon, that was likely the place. The canyon walls loomed high, layered with black and gold sediment. Rusted metal frameworks jutted from the cliff sides. Leftover scaffolding from old dig sites. Beneath, half buried in mud, lay the hulks of mechs and vehicles. The air smelled of ozone and corroded steel. We navigated carefully, mindful of watchtowers or drone patrols. Indeed, we encountered an automated turret perched atop a ridge. Its sensor array scanned the canyon floor in a steady sweep. Silver and I managed to avoid detection by moving in the turret's blind spots. We had grown adept at silent teamwork. At last, we spotted a massive structure built into the canyon wall, a fortified bunker with sealed blast doors. A few smaller outbuildings ringed the perimeter, each guarded by corporate troops. For a moment, my heart sank at the magnitude of it. My battered sidearm and Silver's claws seemed woefully insufficient for storming such a fortress. But we had one advantage: stealth. The corporate squads, though well armed, were spread thin, searching for Wolfen in the wild. Their presence here was minimal, mostly automated defenses. We circled around, scouting the perimeter for hours. Eventually, we found a service hatch partially concealed beneath debris. I pried it open, overriding the rusted locking mechanism. Inside was a narrow access tunnel, leading into the facility's underbelly. It was dark, but I had a small flashlight, and Silver's eyes glowed with keener vision. Cautiously, we descended. The corridor was claustrophobic, reeking of stale air and old lubricant. My nerves were on edge as we turned each corner, expecting to run into a patrol. But aside from a few scurrying vermin, the passages were deserted. At last, we emerged into a wide chamber, lined with rows of consoles and data terminals, an old command center. Screens flickered with half-dead readouts, cables snaking across the floor. A single big monitor displayed an ominous schematic, an orbital platform poised above Velmora, labeled Thunder Spear. My breath caught. This was our chance to disrupt Tarvik's doomsday plan. I hurried to the main console, punching keys, searching for a sabotage routine or an override. Silver hovered at my side, scanning the darkness for threats. At first, I found only fragments of code, corrupted by time. Then deeper in the system, I discovered an encrypted file referencing the Thunder Spear's coordinates and a failsafe. If I could breach that file, maybe I could disable the platform's targeting. However, I needed a security passcode. Suddenly, movement flared behind us. The door to the chamber hissed open, revealing a Tarvik officer flanked by two security drones. They raised their weapons, headlights glaring in our eyes. "Freeze!" the officer barked. "Step away from the console." "Carver!" Silver snarled and tensed to leap. But I recognized the drone's aiming lasers. She'd be gunned down mid-lunge. With a steadying breath, I lifted my hands, stepping away from the console. "You're outnumbered," the officer continued. "That Wolfen is property of Tarvik, and you. You're a liability." The drones advanced, a metallic hum filling the air. Silver's eyes darted, measuring the risk. The officer tapped a command on his wrist device, presumably preparing to summon reinforcements. My mind raced. If we surrendered, Tarvik would glean the data from the console, and the Wolfen would be captured. The entire planet might be bombarded from orbit. This was not an option. In a split-second decision, I lunged at the nearest drone, pushing its barrel upward. The muzzle flash seared the ceiling. Silver reacted instantly, tackling the second drone, her jaws closing over its sensor cluster. Sparks flew. The officer cursed, firing his sidearm at me. A sizzling bolt grazed my shoulder. Ignoring the pain, I slammed my elbow into the drone's chassis, reached for my sidearm, and fired point blank into its power core. The drone collapsed in a shower of sparks. Meanwhile, Silver finished shredding the second drone, flinging aside the smoking remains. The officer shouted, stumbling back, trying to raise his comm. I shot the device from his hand, then advanced with savage determination. He sneered. "You're too late, Carver. The Thunder Spear's already armed. This planet's as good as dead." Before I could respond, Silver pounced, pinning him to the floor. He tried to scramble free, but her claws pressed against his chest armor, denting it. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions: anger, vengeance, fear. "Let him talk," I said. Silver hesitated, and in that moment, the officer coughed. "You can't stop it," he rasped. "Only the central uplink, in orbit. That's the only way. Or the master code. Give me the code." I growled, pressing my sidearm to his temple. He scowled, eyes darting. "No, you'll," Silver snarled, applying more pressure. The metal groaned. The officer gasped in pain. All right, he sputtered, rattling off a sequence of letters and numbers. I memorized them. "Is that all?" He nodded frantically, eyes wild. "Please, I can help you." He never finished. Silver's jaws parted in a final snap, and the officer went limp. A choked wave of revulsion swept through me, but I steeled my resolve. We had no time for mercy if we wanted to save the Wolfen, and possibly many more. I rushed back to the console, entering the passcode. A new screen appeared, revealing partial control of the Thunder Spear's targeting. The officer hadn't lied. We could disrupt the targeting from here, but not fully disable the platform. The best I could do was scramble the coordinates, buying time. My fingers flew across the console, rewriting data, looping transmissions. At last, a final beep signaled success, and I slumped in relief, though my heart still hammered. The planet was safe, for now. We left the bunker in a hurry, fully aware that more Tarvik troops would converge soon. Escaping the canyon required stealth and grit, but we managed, slipping past watchtowers under cover of darkness. We heard gunfire echo in the distance, possibly other Wolfen encountering corporate squads. Once clear of immediate danger, we paused in a secluded gully. My injured shoulder throbbed from the officer's bolt. Silver cautiously sniffed the wound, letting out a concerned whine. I rummaged in my pack for a med patch. She watched intently as I dressed the burn, then nudged my cheek reassuringly. The night wore on, and we found a refuge among twisted roots. The canopy overhead rustled in the wind. Silver dozed near me, her tail occasionally brushing my leg. I gazed at her silhouette in the moonlight, the gentle rise and fall of her chest, the proud line of her muzzle. A wave of unexpected tenderness coursed through me. Was it madness to feel this way about an alien Wolfen, engineered in a lab? Possibly, but we had endured life and death struggles, forging a trust that transcended species. Whatever boundaries once existed had blurred, leaving only raw survival and an odd sense of belonging. Morning arrived with the shrill calls of scavenger birds. We set out again, uncertain of our ultimate destination. The Tarvik threat still loomed. though we had delayed their orbital strike. That gave us a glimmer of hope. Perhaps we could escape Velmora altogether, maybe using a stolen corporate ship. But first, we needed to regroup with Silver's pack. If we left them behind, Tarvik would hunt them to extinction. Silver led me to a ravine near a hidden waterfall, where wolfen dens dotted the rock walls. The place was majestic in a wild, untamed way. Vines hung in graceful arcs, and pools of crystal water shimmered in pockets of sunlight. Yet, the wolfen there looked agitated, as if aware the corporate noose tightened around them. A series of howls echoed as Silver announced our arrival. A handful of wolfen emerged, eyeing me carefully. One was an older male with dark fur, missing part of an ear. Another was a female with a brindled coat who carried a pup on her back. Their gazes flicked between Silver and me, wariness plain in their stance. Through a series of growls, barks, and gestures, Silver appeared to explain what we had done, destroying the drones, sabotaging the bunker, acquiring a code to hinder the orbital threat. I caught only fragments of meaning, but the tension eased slightly. The wolfen den was unlike anything I'd witnessed. They had rudimentary social structures, not purely savage, but certainly governed by instincts. They had storages for food, spots for pups to gather. Some wore partial harnesses or scraps of cloth. They communicated in a combination of guttural calls and body language. I realized that Tarvik's meddling had left them in a precarious spot, too intelligent to be mere animals, but lacking the full cultural or technological framework of a typical humanoid civilization. Yet, there was a raw nobility in their eyes, an undeniable sense of belonging to the planet's primal heartbeat. Standing among them, I recalled my old mercenary days, how I'd often felt rootless, drifting from job to job, loyal to no one. Here, in the midst of these hybrid creatures, I felt an odd sense of camaraderie. They accepted me because Silver, their strongest and proudest female, accepted me. Yet, a question lingered. How could we best ensure their survival? The corporations wouldn't stop hunting. I turned to Silver, speaking slowly. "Ship," I said, mimicking a soaring motion with my hand. "We need a ship to leave or to fight Tarvik." Her ears perked. She responded with a series of barks, then gestured at me to follow. We moved away from the others, and I tried to clarify further. "Rescue," I attempted. "Escape, save wolfen." She paused, as if considering. Then, with a decisive nod, she let out a short bark. We had a plan, albeit a vague one. Find a means to leave Velmora, or at least get the wolfen out of the kill zone. Over the next few days, Silver and I helped the wolfen gather what they could. We scouted the outskirts of the outpost, listening for rumors of inbound corporate reinforcements. Indeed, they were doubling down. Dropships arrived with fresh squads, scanning the swamps. At one point, we heard that the Tarvik mothership had anchored in high orbit, presumably readying the Thunder Spear for a final strike if the planet's surface operation failed. The code I scrambled would only buy us limited time. Eventually, the corporate techs would unscramble the data. We needed a bold move, deep in the wolfen dens. I met more of the pack, perhaps 24 total, counting pups. Many were fiercely protective of their territory. Some were wounded, bearing the scars of corporate aggression. Silver was the largest, the most imposing. She seemed to command their respect. At night, I explained my idea to her as best I could. If we could seize a Tarvik shuttle, maybe we could evacuate or even board their orbital facility, sabotage the weapon at its source. It was a desperate gamble, but better than waiting to be bombarded. She considered me with those luminous gold eyes, then let out a howl that roused the entire pack. They gathered, forming a ring, staring at me and Silver. She barked and growled an impassioned series of sounds, presumably outlining a plan. Some wolfen snarled, uncertain, others howled in approval. The older male with the scarred ear pawed the ground, huffing in reluctant agreement. By the time the howls subsided, we had our ragtag alliance. The wolfen would unite to strike a Tarvik stronghold. Capturing a ship, I'd provide what tactical guidance I could. They would fight with tooth and claw, and I'd do my best to handle the technology. It was insane, but the wolfen were strong, cunning, and united by a fierce desire to live free. And I was done running from my corporate pursuers. We chose a Tarvik landing zone near the planet's southwestern quadrant. Satellite imagery pirated from a small data relay the wolfen had once torn from a merc skier showed minimal fortifications, just a skeleton crew that maintained inbound and outbound shipments. A perfect opportunity, or so we hoped. Under the cover of night, the pack assembled. Silver led them, her silver pelt gleaming under the twin moons. I followed close behind, heart drumming with a mixture of fear and conviction. Each wolfen was armed with their natural weapons, fangs, claws, primal speed. I carried my rifle and the officer's stolen sidearm, plus a few improvised explosives cobbled from salvage. The landing zone lay in a clearing ringed by floodlights and wire fencing. A single shuttle was parked on a pad, guarded by a handful of armed drones. A turret perched on a watchtower. Beyond that, a prefab building stood, presumably the control hub. Our approach was silent, the wolfen slinking through the tall grass. I disabled an exterior alarm by snipping a cable near the fence. Two wolfen ambushed a patrolling guard with lethal efficiency, dragging him away before he could raise an alert. Creeping forward, we spotted the watchtower occupant, a board operator scanning the horizon. We had to neutralize the turret. I planted an explosive charge at the base of the tower, then motioned the wolfen back. A muffled boom toppled the structure, knocking the turret offline. A frantic alarm began to blare inside the control hub. The element of surprise was slipping away. Silver let out a commanding snarl, and the wolfen surged forward, blitzing the guard posts. Flashing muzzle fire lit the night, but the wolfen scattered, leaping and ducking with uncanny speed. Screams cut through the chaos as the corporate defenders were overwhelmed by fur-taut claws and snapping jaws. Meanwhile, I sprinted toward the shuttle, weaving between crates. Two drones popped up to block my path, peppering the air with plasma bursts. I dove behind a container, returning fire. One shot clipped a drone's sensor, sending it crashing. The second soared overhead, its weapons whining. I planted my back against the crate, panting. Then Silver sprang into view, leaping from the top of the shuttle. She collided with the drone midair, wrenching it to the ground in a fiery explosion of sparks. She let out a roar of triumph, tossing aside its wrecked chassis. "Thanks," I breathed, rushing to the shuttle's ramp. Inside the cockpit, I found minimal defenses, just a startled pilot with wide eyes. I aimed my rifle, and he raised his hands in surrender. "Get out," I barked. He scurried away, not wanting to face the wolfen. My hands flew over the controls. Luckily, I'd flown similar small craft in my mercenary days. With a few keystrokes, I initiated startup. Engines hummed to life. The console displayed a flickering holo readout of Velmora's terrain. The wolfen, alerted by the noise, began to gather around the ramp. I waved frantically, trying to get them aboard. They crowded in, growling uncertainly at the enclosed space. Pups whined. The larger adults eyed the interior with suspicion, but Silver stepped forward, pressing her palm to my shoulder in a reassuring gesture. If she trusted me, So would they. I pressed the throttle. The shuttle rose with a lurch, dust swirling in the floodlights. A few last corporate shots pinged off the hull, but soon we were airborne, accelerating into the stormy skies. The Wolfen howled in alarm and excitement, clinging to whatever handholds they could find. Below us, the landing zone receded into the darkness, dotted with fires. I swallowed hard, gazing at the overhead sensor panel. The real challenge lay ahead, the orbiting Tarvik mothership. With that deadly weapon, could I possibly dock or slip aboard undetected? Or should we attempt to flee the planet entirely? Once free of the atmosphere, I set course for the coordinates indicated by the console. The vantage from space revealed Velmora's swirling clouds, the turquoise skies replaced by the black expanse of stars. In the distance, a large silhouette glinted menacingly, the Tarvik mothership. "This is madness," I muttered under my breath. "What am I doing?" Silver, perched behind me, tilted her head. She touched my shoulder and let out a low croon, as if to say, "You are not alone." A wave of determination steadied my nerves. We had come this far together, approaching the mothership. I attempted to mask our shuttle's ID signature by piggybacking on the codes from the officer's passkey. The console beeped in acceptance. Somehow, we drifted closer without being obliterated by the ship's defenses. Perhaps they were too busy recalibrating the scrambled Thunder Spear. We slipped into a docking bay, half deserted, as if the crew had been redeployed to the surface. I landed the shuttle with a dull clang. My heart pounded, fear warring with the adrenaline of the moment. The Wolfen sniffed the air. Tense. We disembarked into the cavernous bay, crates and scaffolding all around. A few startled technicians gawked at us, then bolted. I shot a security camera overhead, hoping to delay an alarm. Leading the pack through the corridors was a test in stealth. The Wolfen padded silently, but their numbers were large, and we couldn't hide easily. We needed to reach the weapon control center, presumably near the heart of the ship. An alarm klaxon finally blared, echoing down the metal halls. Automated turrets popped from the walls, blazing with gunfire. The Wolfen scattered, some taking hits but persisting. Fueled by fierce loyalty, Silver roared, leaping upon a turret, tearing out its wiring. I used my last explosive to blast open a sealed hatch, forging a path forward. The deeper we went, the more intense the resistance. Squads of corporate soldiers tried to form choke points, but the Wolfen were relentless, bounding off walls, attacking from ceilings and vents. Shouts and gunfire reverberated as the corridors became a brutal battleground. At last, we reached the central control deck, a large chamber ringed by glass panels, showing the planet below. In the center stood a towering console with a rotating hologram of Velmora. Several Tarvik officers manned it, frantically tapping commands to bring the Thunder Spear back online. One of them turned at our entrance, eyes wide with terror. Wolfen bounded in, fangs bared. I fired 2 shots, dropping an armed guard. Another officer tried to raise his sidearm, but a Wolfen female slashed him down. I rushed to the main console, ducking behind it to avoid a flurry of panicked shots. Silver vaulted over me, tackling the last armed officer. The air rang with the final gunshots, then fell silent aside from the Wolfen's panting. My trembling hands found the console's override function. The code that had scrambled the weapon's coordinates was partially undone, but not fully. I typed a more permanent directive, power down, set to offline. A status bar flickered, then beeped. The Thunder Spear's massive lens array, which glowed ominously on the forward viewer, began powering down. The entire ship shuddered as the weapon system spun to a halt. I forced a permanent data wipe, overwriting the core software. We had done it. The Wolfen, battered but unbroken, had seized control of Tarvik's doomsday mechanism. But the alarms still blared, and the ship's engines thrummed dangerously. We had to escape, or risk being trapped in orbit. I spotted a hangar bay on the holo, with a larger transport that might accommodate the entire pack. We retreated through the corridors, narrowly avoiding more security teams. Reaching the designated bay, we found an enormous cargo craft. The Wolfen piled aboard, howling in confusion. I scrambled to the cockpit, bypassing the lock. The engines roared to life. In the last moments, a squad of Tarvik troopers stormed into the bay, unleashing furious gunfire. Wolfen howled in pain, one or two collapsing. A pang of sorrow stabbed my heart. Silver roared, returning fire with a captured rifle. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The cargo craft lifted off the deck, swaying precariously as bullets ricocheted. At the final second, I slammed the throttle. The craft surged forward, blasting out of the hangar in a plume of engine fire. We soared away from the mothership, leaving Tarvik's final defenders cursing behind us. With unsteady hands, I stabilized the controls. Silver limped into the cockpit, a bleeding wound on her thigh. I quickly pressed a med patch to it, tears burning my eyes at the sight of her pain. She leaned into me, panting, trusting. We set a course away from Velmora, away from the Tarvik mothership. The Wolfen needed a new home, free from corporate tyranny. And well, I had no illusions about an easy future, but for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of belonging. Days later, the cargo craft touched down on an uncharted planet in a quiet star system, far from Tarvik's grasp. It was a lush world with ample forests, rolling hills, and abundant wildlife. Preliminary scans showed no advanced civilization, only a stable biosphere, a perfect place for the Wolfen to start anew. We disembarked. The Wolfen scattered across the grassy meadows, sniffing the air, letting out jubilant howls. Pups bounded in excitement, while older Wolfen stretched their limbs in the untainted sunlight. For the first time, I heard no echoes of gunfire, no roar of machinery, only the gentle hum of wind and the laughter of living creatures. Silver limped at my side, her wound healing slowly. She nuzzled my arm, a silent show of affection. I placed a hand on her flank, gratitude flooding through me. We had fought, bled, and triumphed together. I busied myself ensuring the cargo craft's systems were stable, salvaging supplies for constructing rudimentary shelters. The Wolfen needed no elaborate cities, only a safe haven, where they could roam unharried, forging their own destiny. A few of them, those who had picked up fragments of Terran or universal speech, tentatively tried to converse with me. The older male with the scarred ear approached, chuffing and nudging me. He pointed to the horizon, then patted his own chest in a gesture of pride. I understood he was vowing to protect this place, to claim it for the pack. I turned to Silver, letting out a breath. A swirl of emotion overcame me. Relief, exhaustion, and a profound sense of wonder. She pressed her forehead gently to mine, eyes half closed in contentment. In that moment, it didn't matter that we were different species, or that Tarvik once branded her an experiment and me a renegade. All that mattered was that we were alive, free, and no longer alone. Home, I murmured, wrapping an arm around her. She rumbled a soft note of agreement, tail swishing. Yes, it was madness. But it was a madness I'd choose again. A bond forged in the savage wilds of Velmora, tested by corporate greed, and sealed by the quiet promise of a future beyond fear. In the weeks that followed, the Wolfen pack adapted swiftly to their new home. They ranged across the valleys and forest groves, setting up dens and marking territories. Vegetation flourished under the bright sun, offering abundant prey. I did what I could to help them with technology basic medical aid, small power sources for my own gear, though they seemed more at ease with nature. Gradually, I taught them some of my language, and I learned more of their guttural speech. It was an ongoing dance of bridging worlds. Silver's wound healed, leaving only a faint scar. She asserted her role as a leader among the wolfen, respected by all. At times, I joined her in hunts, though I was nowhere near her speed or stealth. She seemed amused by my attempts, often nudging me gently as if to say, "Keep trying, little human." We never discovered exactly what happened on Velmora after our escape. Perhaps Tarvik scoured the surface, or perhaps they abandoned the planet after losing their main experiment and sabotaging their prized weapon. But we found an unspoken peace in not knowing. Our planet was calm, with skies that shimmered at dusk in hues of lavender and gold. The wolfen thrived, forging a future free from corporate oppression. And I found a place to belong, at the side of the silver-furred Wolfwoman, who once hunted me across the swamps, who now lay curled against me each night beneath alien stars. One morning, as we gazed at the rising sun from a grassy ridge, Silver looked at me with those keen golden eyes and spoke a single, halting word in my language, "Mate," she said softly. I felt tears well up, a lump forming in my throat. In that single word, she encapsulated everything we'd been through: our fear, our hope, our bond. I took her clawed hand in mine, pressing it gently. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling with gratitude and awe. "Mate." And so we stood there, a man and a wolfwoman, survivors in a strange galaxy, determined to create a life worth living, a life free of fear. A new dawn stretched before us, luminous with endless possibility. Despite the hardships, the heartbreak, and the swirling chaos of fate, we had found a rare, unbreakable bond, and we faced the future together, at peace, guided by the simple, powerful truth of that single word, "mate." A better ending than any I could have dared imagine. In a universe all too often marred by greed and violence, we discovered love, hope, and a sense of belonging in the unlikeliest of places.